It's the first week of the preseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we got you covered here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. It's the North Shore Drive podcast, your host, Chris Carter. We start with Ray Fittipaldo on the week, getting you ready for it. And we're going to talk about how that first week of pads went, who are the biggest winners out of the first week of pads, talk about the quarterback situation, and get you an inside look on Ray Fittipaldo's first 53-man roster projection. It's all here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it. You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter. Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter. He's Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, you can find our written work at post-gazette.com. And you can find the North Shore Drive podcast every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday right here on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all the episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, they have over 500 different available beers, 300 of those beers from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And they've got so many great food options and so many other reasons to go there. We'll go over more of that later. Ray, we had a very eventful second week of practice with the Steelers watching that. It was the first week of pads. So I wanted to, we'll get to the quarterback situation. I know a lot of people want to talk about that, but I wanted to lead off with you. Now that we've seen, I think it was 4 padded practices. You had Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday were your padded practices. Who do you feel like were some of the biggest names that stood out to you with the physicality, which is something that Mike Tomlin, Arthur Smith, and everyone in the organization has said that's going to be a bell tone for this season?
Yeah, Chris, when the pads come on, I like to follow Mike Tomlin around the field. So when they're not doing 11-on-11 team stuff, I like to go where Mike goes, and he is always at the O-line, D-line, one-on-ones. And, I think they did those 2 or 3 times since the pads came on. And I think overall the offensive line, especially the young offensive linemen, did really well. We can get into a bunch of the individuals as we discuss this. But just talking about on Sunday, Mason McCormick had 3 reps against Logan Lee, stuffed him all 3 times. So the next time around in the rotation, Tomlin calls out 66 and 97. He puts Mason McCormick up against Cam Hayward, and Cam went up against him 3 times. McCormick, I thought, did a great job the first 2 times, probably won both reps. Hayward didn't beat him clean. And then the 3rd rep, Hayward put a spin move on him and beat him. But I just think when you give young rookies like that, a 4th-round pick, an opportunity to go up against an established veteran like Hayward, and he does well, that just paints a picture of where Mike Tomlin thinks he is, because they don't always mix those matchups.
Right.
It's always
right.
It's mostly starters against starters, offense, defense, and then 2s against 2s and 3s against 3s. So the fact that Mason McCormick drew that matchup against Cam Hayward and did pretty well, he's having a good camp, and a lot of other young offensive linemen are as well.
I think that's the exciting part of this, right? Is that the Steelers have put such an emphasis and such a big, talking point to say, hey, this offensive line is going to be different. This offense is going to be different because we're going to be physical. And, you talk about Mason McCormick. That wasn't even the guy that we were thinking of the most going into the game. We were thinking about Troy Fautanu and Zach Frazier, and those guys. What have you seen out of those 2 so far?
Yeah.
Zach Frazier was a little tough to judge early because center was a little tougher, and he's been running with the second team mostly. But now we've had some practices to judge both of them. Where do you think those guys are at?
Yeah, Fautanu just continues to impress. I think we talked about it last week. He won 2 out of 3 reps against TJ Watt. On Sunday, we didn't get the rematch. We didn't get Fautanu versus Watt, but we got Fautanu versus Nick Herbig, and people who have watched Herbig know that he can do really well in those one-on-one drills. He is a twitchy dude from the outside. He can, he's got a number of moves, and Troy Fautanu beat him on all 3 reps, just kept him at bay. He's just really, really solid in pass pro, Chris. I don't know what they're waiting for. Maybe they just want to have him earn it right before they put him, excuse me, into the starting lineup. But I can tell you the issue isn't pass protection. He is a really good pass protector. He could step in right now and do the job and do it extremely well. And Frazier on Sunday didn't get to go. Some of the D linemen were held out. Benton didn't do a lot today. He went up against Jacob Slade, won that matchup twice. He's been really solid in pass pro too. And you saw throughout the week, Chris, in the 11-on-11 run team periods, first and second team offensive line were moving the football. I know it didn't happen today in short yardage goal line, on Sunday, but I think overall Frazier, Fautanu, McCormick, really the entire offensive line has done a nice job being physical and winning a lot of the matchups against the defensive line.
I agree with you there. Let's dive back in real quick to those rookies in the offensive line, especially Troy Fautanu. I think that's the big question that's left unanswered right now. When are we going to see Troy Fautanu at right and Broderick Jones at left? Because everyone's waiting for these are the two latest first round picks. Fautanu's looked good in practice. Broderick Jones has looked good in practice, and yet it's been Broderick Jones on the right and then Troy Fautanu on the right in the second team, and then Broderick goes to the left on the second team. Dan Moore Jr. still that starting left tackle, and I think there's a lot of fans that are just, and I get the anxiety. Dan Moore Jr. has been beat really bad in several games in his past, and there was even a practice, I think it might have been Friday or Saturday, I think it's actually probably Saturday, where he lost 3 straight reps where he gave up 2 sacks and a tackle for loss, or 3 straight reps in succession, and it was just like it's really noticeable there. When do you think we do get to see Fautanu and Jones on the line at the same time, or do you think that's just not going to happen?
Yeah, I mean it's the $100,000 question, because I mean just go back to April. That's why they invested another number 1 pick in a tackle. They believe that that was a big issue last year, and I have to agree with them. So Mike Tomlin and his staff, they're always deliberate. They want to make sure Fautanu is ready. I think once they come to that conclusion, you do want to get Broderick Jones back over to the left, because he has been repping so much on the right. I think you want to be fair to him and get him back on the left side, really where he hasn't played consistently since his days at the University of Georgia. So there is a time element here that we're working with. You can't just do it, September 1st. I think you probably got to make that move. They're not going to do it before the Texans game. They wouldn't do that to Dan Moore. But if Dan Moore struggles a little bit and there's a reason to look at it, I think you could see it the next week, if not the next week, the week after. And then once they start repping it, I think it'll only be a matter of time before Fautanu is running with the ones and Broderick Jones is on the left side with the ones as well.
That's very interesting to see there. I want to talk about the quarterback situation. We'll do that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo, stick with us. We got that and a 53-man roster projection to go through. We'll do that in a minute here. But first, want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in Pittsburgh, and I mean that. It is the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you go into Mike's Beer Bar, it's right on the North Shore, right across the street from PNC Park. It's on Federal Street. They have a great view of the downtown skyline across the Clemente Bridge when you sit outside, or you can sit inside and enjoy one of their 20 different televisions that have the Olympics on, that have the Pirates on, that have any game on that you want to get. They're going to be able to get on those TVs. It's an amazing sports location, and it's an amazing place to just have a great time. They have over 500 different available beers for you. 300 of those beers are from the local Pittsburgh area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And every single day, they're switching new ones in and out to get you new experiences every time you get there. Go there today, and you can sample several different ones on a flight. Get your favorite one that you like over and over. Whatever you like, they got it there. And they also have amazing food like their steak on a stone, where you get your choice cut of steak brought to you on a heated stone. Every time you cut off a piece, just press it into that stone and you choose how well done you want every single bite. It's the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today, and when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about the quarterbacks now, because I know that's what a lot of people want to get into. And you and I have talked about this off camera and on camera. I personally feel Justin Fields has taken significant steps since we first saw him at the start of training camp, where he looked discombobulated. He had happy feet. He didn't know where to go half the time. He looked confused in the first couple of days. And ever since that third practice, I felt like he's been taking step forward after step forward. I thought he looked great. I thought his best day might have been for a while the first day in pads on Tuesday. But then I thought he looked sharp in Friday Night Lights. I thought he looked sharp Saturday. I thought he looked sharp again Sunday when we saw him then, even though the defense won. I think you're seeing Justin Fields process so much quicker, know where to go with the football, not hesitate as much, and look more confident in where he is in the Steelers offense. Do you see the same thing there? Do you think that he has shown a lot more of the growth in the Steelers offense? Do you think that maybe some of this is a little overstated?
No, I think these reps have been invaluable to Justin Fields, because had Russell Wilson not been injured, his reps would have been, pretty much cut in half, I think, when you look at it, the way they divvy up the reps between the ones, twos, in the threes here at training camp. So I agree with you. He's steadily improved. It's not perfect. We talked to him after Sunday's practice, and he said there's still things to clean up, but there's a chemistry there with George Pickens. We saw today a short pass to Pickens over the middle turned into a long touchdown. I think with Van Jefferson, the rapport with him, Van. I wrote about this on Saturday. I think Van Jefferson is now clearly established as the number 2 receiver behind George Pickens. And I think, Fields has done a nice job of delivering him the ball as well. So, yeah, I think it's good to see. And the nice thing, Chris, if you look at it, we haven't even seen like the full Justin Fields yet, because there's going to be designed runs that they would game plan if Justin Fields ever has to be the starting quarterback of this football team. We see the improvisation sometimes when plays break down here, but when it's practice or training camp, you're not really getting what you would see in a game there. So I think there's much more to his game. I think what you have to wonder is, okay, when he does become the full Justin Fields, when we see him like that, can he cut down on the interceptions when he does have to improv? Is he still playing within himself in those situations? If he does that, then I think we're seeing a different quarterback than the guy who played for the Chicago Bears. He's done a nice job picking up Arthur Smith's system, and I think Arthur Smith and his coaches have done a nice job molding him into the quarterback they want him to be.
I agree. I think that we have seen, like, Justin Fields has even told us when he got to the Steelers, they didn't tell him to be anything but himself. I think they wanted to see where's the foundation. And ever since they've seen that, they've been talking him through it. They've been coaching him through it. And I think like you said, we both saying here, he's making real progress. He's shown that he's more comfortable. I think that his mechanics are shoring up and he's becoming more consistent with the accuracy of his throw. Because that was another thing that also was, it wasn't just not knowing where to go with the football. It was also messing up when he did try to go somewhere with the football. And we're seeing less and less of the mistakes, more of the successes. I was counting even in something as simple as 7-on-7, like 7-on-7 the past few years, we kind of forgot that that's supposed to be the easy drill, because even that used to get messed up a lot by the Steelers offense. They did 7-on-7 on Sunday, and it was 4 with Russell Wilson, 4 with Justin Fields, 3 with Russell Wilson, 3 with Justin Fields. The only misses that either of those had was when Van Jefferson fumbled, before getting to the first down marker, and then another one where Champlin got stopped short of the marker. But every single pass was completed there, and we're seeing it in that. We're also seeing it 11-on-11 for Justin Fields. I think there's just a lot more fluidity in this offense. I think that Justin Fields is feeling the rhythm in here. Now, we got to see how this all plays out, because like you and I have talked about in knowledge several times, Kenny Pickett looked amazing in preseason football last year and then was destroyed in the early parts of last season. So the Steelers need to see it. But I think all of these things are very encouraging signs for a young quarterback that everyone was wondering, could the Steelers reform him and get him to play the better version of himself that you didn't see all the time in Chicago?
Yeah, and this Houston Texans game isn't going to be the be-all, end-all.
Correct.
But, Chris, I think the Steelers are going to play their starters for a series or two, and if the Texans do the same, then you're going to see Justin Fields against another good defense. And, I think that'll be another barometer for him. He's done very well against the Steelers defense, but you know how that goes.
Yeah.
You get a beat on guys, and not that you know what's coming, but you just have a feel for how certain guys play. So when you're playing a team in a different jersey, I think that ratchets up, the importance of these reps. And Mike Tomlin says it all the time. These practices are important. These padded practices are really important, but the stuff that counts the most are those preseason games. That's how these guys are judged. That's how these guys make the roster, and that's how these guys eventually win starting jobs.
Certainly. I want to ask you this before we move on to a 53-man roster projection. What is the gap now, do you feel, between Russell Wilson and Justin Fields? Because Russell Wilson, ever since getting injured, has not taken a full padded 11-on-11 snap where he's thrown the football. It's always been he comes in for a play, hands it off, and that's kind of it. But also I feel like it's obvious the Steelers probably trust that Russell Wilson, when he plugs in, he'll be ready to go because he's an NFL quarterback that's done that. But, before I thought it was an obvious pole position. Wilson 1, Fields 2, no questions asked. But Ray, I got questions now because Justin Fields has looked good. And I'm not saying that he's done enough to overtake Russell Wilson, but I think now it is not as obvious of a quarterback situation as it was coming into camp. What more would you have to see from Justin Fields to really make your head scratch and say, like, this is going to be a tough call to see who starts at quarterback?
See, the way I look at it is they're not going to let an injury to Russell Wilson be the reason he's not the starter. So as long as this injury doesn't linger, I don't see it as an issue. The way I look at it, Chris, is Justin Fields, the Steelers have to have confidence right now that he's probably one of the best backup quarterbacks in the NFL. And if it comes to a point where he has to play because Russell Wilson is injured, I don't know if there would be much of a step down. That's the way I'm looking at it right now. I think this is a guy that you can win with. I think we talked about it last week. It's probably not going to be the exact same type of offense that they would run for Russell Wilson, and there will be some adaptation that Arthur Smith would do with the playbook. But to me, you got a really viable number 2 quarterback if it comes to that. And Russell Wilson is still this team's starter. And until he gets in there and does not play well, he's always going to be this team's starter. So I look at it as a positive. I think Fields has done really well, but I don't really think it factors into the who's number 1 discussion. I think Wilson has been the clear-cut number 1, and I think he will continue to be that once he gets in there, as long as he plays well.
Absolutely. I want to get to the 53-man roster projection because there's a lot to work on there. We'll go through position by position what Ray thinks about this 53-man roster. That next here on the North Shore Drive podcast. But first, I want to remind you, this show is also brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are mesothelioma and asbestos lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter here with Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, it's time to get an early look at what's going to be in your 53-man roster projection. That is going to be a story that Ray will have out later on Monday, so be on the lookout from that at post-gazette.com. But Ray, let's go position by position, what your expectations are. I'm going to give you all the names that are on the Steelers roster as of now, and we'll go from there, starting at quarterback. Standard is always to keep 3 quarterbacks. You got Kyle Allen, Justin Fields, John Reese Plumlee, and, of course, Russell Wilson. Do you expect 3 quarterbacks in it for the 3 quarterbacks we've seen throughout most of camp?
Yeah, I think they'll keep 3. I think Allen will be the 3rd. Plumlee has played okay. I know they're experimenting with him as a returner, but if he's with the Steelers in any capacity, Chris, I think it'll be as a member of the practice squad. We
got several running backs to look at on the Steelers roster. Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, the obvious 2 to stay. But behind them is a slew of running backs that I think have been very up and down. There's guys people were excited about, like Dajon Edwards from Georgia. There's Aaron Champlin and Michael Perrine. I personally think, Ray, and they also had Jack Coletto, the fullback, that's kind of stepped in there late in training camp. I kind of lean towards Cordero Patterson being the 3rd option here. I don't think that any of the younger guys have really proven. I know Patterson hasn't practiced yet in camp, but I feel like none of the younger guys have really proven much, and they're going to go with Cordero Patterson, use his versatility, and call it a day.
Yeah, and even that, Chris, that would be more than they carried last year. They went to almost the entire season, I think, with only 2 running backs on the 53-man roster. Anthony McFarland, who's no longer with them, was on the practice squad all season. So I'm with you. I don't know what the deal is with Patterson. Haven't even really seen him too much around practice, but I think if he is healthy enough to get off the PUP list, then he likely, well, I guess he's on the NFI list. He's on the non-football injury list,
right?
Because he was injured training. As long as he's healthy, he can get off that list. I think he'll be the number 3, but I think it'll pretty much be as a returner. I don't know that they're going to have much use for him as a running back as long as Harris and Warren are healthy.
I hear you there. Let's go to wide receiver. This is a little tricky here. You can sometimes the Steelers keep 5 or 6 wide receivers, but let's get some of the obvious ones out of the way. Let's acknowledge George Pickens. He's your number 1. He's going to be there. We've talked about Van Jefferson. We think he's the number 2 guy. We're sure he's going to be there. Roman Wilson, he was out of his boot, so he looks like he's recovering well. He's the rookie. They're not letting him go. He's going to be there. And then I guess we can also throw in Calvin Austin because he's kind of an obvious guy for that max. So there's 4 wide receivers there right now for the Steelers. Do they keep 5 or 6? And if there's a 5th or a 6th, who would they be?
Right now, I have them keeping 6, and I got Quez Watkins and Scotty Miller being those 2 guys. If one of those guys would be on the chopping block, let's say, they opt to keep, Cordero Patterson, or another position. Scotty Miller and Calvin Austin are similar players, so I don't know that you need 2 of the same types of guys, on the same 53-man roster. So if one of those guys had to go, I think it would be Miller. But I think he's had a nice camp, Chris. He's quick. He can make people miss. He's done nothing to disappoint me. I think it'd just be a number situation where they wouldn't be able to keep him.
I hear you on that. 6 wide receivers, just to be clear, through quarterback, running back, wide receiver, 12 of the 53 players have been selected. By the way, there is a Build Your Own Steelers roster tool that you can find at post-gazette.com on the interactive side where you can do this exercise along with us. Okay, so let's get to tight end. I feel like there's a standard 3 here: Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Connor Hayward. But we know Michael Pruitt was added to the roster. We know that Rodney Williams has been a guy that stood out before. Is there any reason to believe that the top 3 have changed, or that there's an extra tight end that they might take to the 53-man roster here, Ray?
Well, they carried 4 most of last season. Rodney Williams came up and played 13 games. I know most of his reps came on special teams, but they did carry 4 last year. If they keep 4 this year, I got to think Pruitt is the guy. It's nothing against Williams, but he's got a long history with Arthur Smith. He played for Arthur in Atlanta and Tennessee. I think that counts for something. So, Williams is a guy that maybe you can sneak back onto the practice squad. I think if they keep 4, I would go with Pruitt there over Williams.
Do you think they will end up keeping 4?
Yeah, and here's the deal. I started to think about this. For now, let's do Pruitt is the 4th tight end, and let's keep Patterson off for now just because we don't know his injury situation.
Okay. Yeah. I hear that. So we'll go back there for a second. We'll get rid of Cordero Patterson
because I haven't seen him yet. Like, he hasn't done anything in camp, and he's 33 years old. He's got an injury, so I don't want to put him on the team just yet when he hasn't done anything.
But no, I totally hear you there. All right, so now you have 15 players out of 53. Let's go to the offensive line. This is always one that eats up a lot of space because of how many offensive linemen are needed. But let's go through the obvious ones. Isaac Seumalo, absolutely. Dan Moore Jr. still starting. He's definitely on that line. Broderick Jones, you're not getting rid of the first-round pick. Nate Herbig has been the starting center. Even if he doesn't become the starting center, he's a key piece there to put there for sure. Zach Frazier, you just picked him in the 2nd round. You're not losing him. Troy Fautanu, first-round pick. You're not losing him. James Daniels, starting guard, not losing him. So with those picks right there, that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 7 offensive linemen already with the obvious guys here. Now, as you were talking about, Mason McCormick has looked pretty good. I doubt they let that go to the practice squad. He's there. So now you're talking about 8 offensive linemen. How, other names here that are popping up for us: Spencer Anderson, Dylan Cook, young guys that we've thought might have a chance here. Ryan McCollum, maybe. Who on the rest of this offensive line are you looking at to potentially make this roster? And what is the final number you think will be on the O line?
Yeah, I'm going to go 9, and I'm going to go Spencer Anderson over Dylan Cook.
Okay.
Anderson does have some versatility. I know he's only played guard here this camp, but he played tackle last year. He even played center last year during his rookie training camp. So that versatility is always important. But, Chris, this is the most difficult position for me to handicap. I mean, they got a surplus of guards, they got a bunch of guys who are NFL caliber players.
Yeah.
And, it's going to be hard to cut one of those guys. And, Dylan Cook is having a good camp. They carried him on the 53-man roster all of last season. They did that for a reason. They like him. But it's just such a rarity that you're able to keep 10 offensive linemen. And I just think Anderson's versatility gives him a slight edge over Cook when it comes to that decision.
Very interesting stuff there. Let's move to the defensive line here, taking 9 offensive linemen with you. Let's go to the D-line. Let's get the obvious ones out of the way. Cam Hayward, team leader, he ain't going nowhere. Keanu Benton, second-round pick from last year, a lot expected out of him. Let's go with Larry Ogunjobi, one of the more high-played players on the defensive line. But after that, I think you can kind of get into it. Now, there are some guys I think are going to be there, DeMarvin Leal, Montravius Adams, but I want to let you pick how many D linemen you taking with you and who are the people behind Hayward, Benton, and Ogunjobi.
Yeah, I think they're going to keep 6. I think that was a number that they went with for most of last season. I know that number changes as guys get injured and whatnot. This is hard to handicap. I think DeMarvin Leal is going to get another shot. I know he hasn't lived up to expectations, but he's a former 3rd-round pick, and I think they like his potential. So he'll be number 4. Montravius Adams probably will be on the team, so I'll go with him number 5. And then I think that last spot, do you roll with Isaiah Loudermilk for another year, or do you go with a guy like Logan Lee, who's a 6th-round rookie draft pick? I'm probably leaning towards Loudermilk, but I don't know if that's a done deal. But I do think they'll keep 6 defensive linemen.
We'll put Loudermilk in there for now, just for keeping track's sake. We move to linebacker, and this includes inside and outside linebackers. So there's going to be a lot of people in this list as well. But let's get the obvious ones out of the way. At outside linebacker, definitely T.J. Watt, definitely Alex Highsmith. Those guys have kind of already proven who they are. Not kind of, they absolutely have. Nick Herbig also on there. And one name that I don't think we have yet in our official tool here is Marcus Golden, who's added to the pick. Marcus Golden, he's going to be added there. So we'll just throw in another guy in there in this just so we can keep track. I'll have David Perales as kind of like the holding place for Marcus Golden. So at linebacker, you got 4 guys. At outside, let's go over the obvious inside guys. Patrick Queen, you just signed him. You're not letting him go. Landon Roberts, he's been the man next to him. Peyton Wilson, the other guy there. Now, Cole Holcomb is the interesting piece here because he still hasn't practiced. We haven't seen a lick of Cole Holcomb with his injury. Who do you think is actually on the 53-man roster outside of the top 7 linebackers we've got here? Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, Golden, Queen, Roberts, and Wilson.
Yeah, I think they'll go with 8. You're right. Holcomb isn't going to be on this roster to start the season. Like Cordero Patterson, he hasn't done anything in training camp. So Mark Robinson has been around a couple of years. He's played sparingly. I think he got more run with the special teamers last year. So I'll go Robinson as the 4th inside guy, and obviously the 8th overall when you combine the inside and outside guys.
There you go. All right, linebackers are down 8. We have 38 of the 53 players selected, and we're getting to the secondary now, another deep part of this team to consider. Let's get the obvious secondary corner. We'll start at corner. We'll get the obvious corners out the way. Joey Porter Jr., you're not including that guy. He's the starting number 1 corner. Dante Jackson, you signed him for a reason to be your next corner here. And then, but after that, I think is when it starts to get interesting right away, is to see who else fills out on this. I feel like Beanie Bishop is kind of a given with the way that he's been used in the slot. So I'll throw him in there as your 3rd corner. Cam Sutton doesn't necessarily count because he'll be suspended. So he won't count against the 53-man roster. So we're not including him. But you got guys like Corey Trice, Darius Rush, Thomas Graham Jr.'s made some plays, Kalen Barnes, Anthony Averett. So let's say we got 3 corners now. Do they go with 6? And if there's 6, who are the other 3?
Yeah, I think overall they will keep 10 defensive backs. So it'll be a little bit interesting how it plays out. I'm not sure if it's going to be 5 and 5 or 6 and 4. I think Corey Trice is trending. I know they're bringing him along slowly because he's pretty much a year out from that ACL tear. I think as long as he progresses, Chris, I think he'll be the top outside cornerback up. I know that's a little bit of a projection, but they like his length and they like his size. So I think he could be that guy. So, that gives you 4 with Beanie Bishop. Number 5, Everett hasn't stood out much to me, but he's a veteran. He's been in this league before. So I'll go Everett right now as the 5th corner on this team.
5 corners there. You got 10 players left, and you got safeties and special teams to go here for a 53-man roster. Let's look at the safety position here. Obviously, Minkah Fitzpatrick, you're not including that guy there. Deshaun Elliott, DeMonte KZ, all 3 of those guys there at safety. Yeah. So you got 3 safeties. If you took 5 corners, now you have space for 5 safeties. Yeah. Obvious name here is Miles Killebrew, Pro Bowl special teamer. You're not letting him go. Right. But after that is Graylin Arnold, Nathan Metters, and Ryan Watts, who I think has looked good in camp at the safety position. Is Ryan Watts just the obvious pick here?
Yeah, I mean, listen, they kept the entire draft class last year. I know Trice went to IR, but all those guys were on the 53-man roster the entire season. We got a chance to see that again. I'm not 100% sure about Logan Lee and Ryan Watts, but Ryan Watts made a play in the goal line drill, had a pick of a Kyle Allen on Sunday. He's shown up a little bit. You notice him. The key there, Chris, is he's making the transition from college corner to NFL safety. Ideally, maybe you do that on the practice squad, but honestly, right now, I don't know if there's a better option to bump Ryan Watts off the roster. So, this one may change, in the next month before they really do this for real. But right now I got Ryan Watts making this football team.
And then finally, special teamers, obvious here, 3 special teamers, kicker, punter, long snapper. Your kicker's Chris Boswell. He ain't going there. Cameron Johnston has been impressive in camp. And maybe this is just the thirsty horse just getting the water here, Ray, but it just feels like it's been so long since you've seen good punting in Pittsburgh, and that's kind of why he looks like he's kicking butt. But either way, he's making the team. Christian Kunz, your long snapper there. Right. No real big notes there on special teams.
There we go. We got the 53-man roster. No need to play the 3 preseason games, right?
Well, see, here's the other thing. There's 2 spots left. We got 51 players picked here. So I wanted to go back over if you got I'm going to go back over just the numbers by position. 3 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 6 receivers, 4 tight ends, 9 offensive linemen, 6 defensive linemen. I think we said 8. I think you got 8 linebackers, 5 corners, 5 safeties there. Which is the group that you think most likely, which are the groups that you feel are most likely to get the other 2 spots here?
They always carry, if they ever go over, like if they go with the D-backs, if they, it's not out of the question that they can go with 11 D-backs. So, a guy like Graylin Arnold has made some plays. So, maybe somebody along those lines. If you want to go back to the offense, I know they didn't keep 3 running backs last year, Chris, but, Jonathan Ward and some of those other running backs, Perrine, have stood out. They've done well. So, if that's part of the equation, then maybe one of those guys could potentially find their way onto the 53-man roster.
So we'll include another running back in that mix there. And so I guess another corner. You meant another corner or a safety. You mentioned Thomas Graham. Would Darius Rush turn your head at all? You think that he's pretty much a cut guy at this point?
Chris, I know he was on the roster last season. I haven't noticed him a lot in training camp this year. Maybe he'll make some plays during the preseason. But he's definitely in contention for a roster spot. I don't think he's fallen off the map that much. I just haven't noticed him that much through the first 2 weeks of practice.
I hear you there. That is your 53-man roster projection from Ray Fittipaldo. To read the full final cut Go to post-gazette.com for everything there. Ray, thanks so much for joining me here on the Monday edition of the North Shore Drive podcast. Remember, this podcast is every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this channel to get all of those episodes and the daily content that comes out from our Pittsburgh Post-Gazette sports writers, including all the daily training camp updates. Remember, there is no practice today. The Steelers are off on Monday, but they're back at it on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then, of course, the first preseason game is Friday. We'll keep you here, updated here all week long from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette from Chris Carter and Ray Fittipaldo. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you again Wednesday here on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.